My name is Zoe, and I am 9. I'm in 4th grade. And what I like to do for fun is pet my cat. And I'm in New York. So I'm going to read today The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and they were named Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in the sandbank underneath a root of a very, very big tree. "Now, my dears," said old Miss Rabbit one morning, "you must go to the fields or down the lane, but don't go too close to Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had axe in there. He was put in a pie by Miss McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." Then old Miss Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the woods and went the wood to the baker's. She brought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were very good little bunnies, went down to the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed into the gate. First, he ate some lettuce, then some fresh beans, and then he ate some radishes, and then, he feeling rather sick, he went to go look for some parsley. But around the end, the cumber came, who he met but Mr. McGregor. Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages. But he jumped and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and he lost another shoe among the potatoes. And after losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that he might have got away altogether if he has unforgotten run into a gooseberry net. And he caught by the large buttons in his jacket. It was a blue jacket, brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed a big tear, but he saw his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew him into great excitement and implored to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sleeve, which he indeed to pop under the top of Peter. But Peter wrangled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into a tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in, if it hadn't so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden under one of the flower pots. He began to turn over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Achoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out the window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired running after Peter, so he went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright. He had no least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lipsly, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in the wall, but it was locked. There was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in about over the stone stair step, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she couldn't even answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden. But he began more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. That caught my cat's attention. Very still, but now the tip of her tail switched as it were alive. Peter thought it was the best way to go without sneaking to her. He had heard about cats from her cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard a noise of a hoe. Scratch, 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 scratch. Peter stuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed to a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned over Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off of his wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could along the straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate, was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung a little jacket and his shoes, a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him until he got home to a big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole. And he shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered, what has he done with his clothes? It was the second little jacket of pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter's not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed, made sure some chamomile-tea. She gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Bye.